All right, welcome back in Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall, a live look at the White House. We've been following very closely the movements of troops being deployed to cities across the U.S. and the idea of troops being sent to more cities across the country as well. The news of the day is that a federal judge in Oregon is temporarily blocking President Trump from deploying the National Guard in Portland, Oregon, ruling Saturday in a lawsuit brought by the state and the city. You've probably been watching some of our coverage this weekend. We've been watching as people have been gathering to protest in the streets of Portland, Oregon. We took some of those vantage points live yesterday. This is some of what we've seen earlier in the week as well. Ultimately, the judge handing down this decision because she said that there were relatively small protests and that it did not justify the use of federalized forces, and allowing the deployment could harm Oregon State's sovereignty. That's according to the judge that made this ruling. Hal Kempfer is here to discuss this. We've had Hal on to discuss the deployment of troops in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., the idea of it in Chicago, and of course, Hal and I have been tracking the situation in Portland for the past few days. Hal, how likely is it for this to be overturned?
I read the decision, or the ruling, if you will, and it looks to me, based on the language that she used in that ruling, that it's very likely to be overturned at the appellate court level, at the circuit court. And frankly, she mentioned martial law as a consideration, and there's just that, first off, under U.S. law, we don't have a provision for martial law. That's it's a term that Hollywood loves, but we don't actually have a term for it under U.S. law. So the fact that she referenced that, I thought, really kind of tended to diminish the credibility of the overall ruling when you look at it. And then, of course, she's talking about it's not needed. Well, now she's making a statement, if you will, a qualitative statement based on her view of the protests, but it's not a statement on the president's legal ability to send federalized National Guard to a federal facility. And that's a pretty big decision. When you're telling the president that the president cannot send the federal military to protect federal property, federal bases, federal installations, federal personnel, that's a pretty broad opinion. So with that said, I just don't think it's going to survive when it goes up for review. But interestingly, that court decision it strictly applies to Oregon. The Oregon Attorney General obviously is only concerned about Oregon, so it's limited to Oregon itself, and by extension, limited to the Oregon National Guard.
Is it clear to us, let's say that this does eventually get overturned, is it clear whether troops can do anything there in the interim?
Well, the California National Guard is coming in, and they're going to actually deploy. I think the first 101 California National Guard troops rolled in last night in Oregon, and there should be 300 total that will be there, which is actually, I believe, about the same or maybe a little bit more than what Oregon was actually going to send up to Portland. What they'll do is kind of what they did in California. They will protect federal military or federal installations like the ICE facility in South Portland, like the federal building downtown. Any federal building, any federal property, you can use federal military. The president can use federal military to protect them. Not always the most cost-effective way of doing it, but it is something that is legal, albeit one could make an action based on the U.S. Economy Act, based on the cost of that and whether it's the most cost-effective, and that would be one that would actually be based on need. So that would actually support it. But I didn't see where this judge had actually really rested much on the U.S. Economy Act. I'll go back and check that later, but I didn't see anything in there that jumped out to me on that. Yes, they can use federal troops. Now, if they use federal troops to protect federal personnel, doing ICE personnel, for example, ICE agents doing immigration enforcement, that should be legal too. Although you saw in California that a federal judge ruled that they were violating posse comitatus in the way they're doing that. Again, I've already said before, I think the Ninth Circuit Court is going to probably reverse that decision based on that ruling, but that is yet to be seen, and that only applied to the California situation. So we'll see how this kind of rolls out in the courts, but some of the things that these individual federal court judges are saying, I don't think will make it, through the circuit court review or appellate process. And I would be very surprised if the Supreme Court would agree with some of these rulings and some of the thinking by these federal court judges.
So, if President Trump can deploy California's troops to Oregon, can he send any state's troops to any state?
Interestingly, say that. Yeah, they're federal. Once they're federal, which means they can go anywhere, literally in the world. They can go anywhere. They're federal troops. You send them to any U.S. state, any U.S. territory. You can send them to any foreign country around the world. They are federal troops. That's something that these these governors seem to be having a difficult time grasping. They are paid for. They go to when they go to boot camp, they go to a U.S. Army boot camp. All right, they are federally recognized troops, and or unless they go to an Air Force boot camp, I should mention, but they are federally recognized troops, and the federal government pays for their facilities. It pays for their planes, their tanks, their weapons, all the stuff that supports them for their training and readiness, preparedness to perform that federal mission. That is all federal stuff. And in exchange for that, they are part of the reserve component of the federal military, of the federal government. They are part of the reserve military component of our country, and they are a critical part and always have been a critical part. If you look at the divisions that landed in Normandy back in 1944, that was primarily National Guard divisions that did that, but they had been in federal status for some time, undergoing a lot of specialized training. But they are federal troops. If you look at the War on Terror, we deployed National Guard units all over the world, still do deploy National Guard units all over the world, but they're under federal status. So, yes, the president could do that. And frankly, if the president wanted to go north and federalize some Washington State National Guard troops and send them down to Oregon, conceivably, he could do that as well.
I want to show you a piece of video that was posted by the official account, the ICE official account. They posted this earlier this morning. They say, Portland, refuse to walk? We'll give you a ride. This is the video. Shows them what appears to be wheeling away a woman who was being detained in Portland. Hal, I sent this to you earlier today. Have you seen this before? Is this a new police tactic?
It may be new for this. I will tell you that they come up with all sorts of creative ways to get protesters that refused. That's one of the protest tactics, is just simply refusing to cooperate, refusing to walk. They will sit or lie and refuse to be moved. And then there's only so many ways. You can literally pick them up and carry them, and that usually is an immediate short-term solution. But after a while, that gets kind of old. So if you have something where you can put them in a vehicle or on a cart or something, as long as you can transport them safely, and in this case, they had a cart that they obviously used for other purposes, like maybe moving heavy boxes or something, and but it is long enough that you can actually put a person on the cart and safely carry them. And of course, part of this is, can you safely carry them? And as you look at how that person is actually on the cart with their feet over that over the handle, over the crossbar piece, that limits their ability to move. Sometimes they will try and roll or something like that in order to cause an injury to themselves or something. But in this case, I actually thought it was kind of a creative way to move a protester, and one that doesn't put the protester, in potential harm's way.